Okay, thank you very much, Christina. Thanks for the introduction to the panel. To the program as a whole and to this panel in particular. So to everybody joining or rejoining for the afternoon, thank you all for being with us and for your attention, and in particular for your interest in the topic of immigration and human rights. So I'm looking forward to introducing this group of people to you. I think what I'm going to ask them to do as part of a more detailed introduction is actually tell you something about themselves and about their work. But very briefly, I'll tell you, I am a board member of the Washington Council of Lawyers, and also I'm pro bono counsel at the Washington, D.C. office of Fried Frank, head the pro bono practice there, and our program, as well as my individual practice, is focused a great deal in the immigration area, asylum and other immigration case types, and we should be able to talk a little bit more about those going forward. So the other panelists that we have, just for a very brief introduction, Marcia Mack from the law firm of Mayer Brown, Shailene Morales. Shailene is at Remain, the Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocates Network in Colorado. Adonia Simpson from the American Bar Association Commission on Immigration. I'm looking straight across my screen. You may be seeing folks in different order, so this is not intended in any area of order of importance whatsoever. And Austin Rose from CARE Coalition, Capital Area Immigrants' Rights Coalition. So that's our group for today. So let me go back, Marcia, and start with you. And these are the same introductory topics that I'm going to ask each of you to cover, but can you introduce yourself in a little more detail to the attendees? Tell us about you, a bit about your firm, your role there, and in particular, the way you and Mayer Brown focus in the immigration and human rights arena.
Sure. Thank you so much, Karen. I want to thank the Washington Council of Lawyers for putting this panel together and for inviting me to participate. I'm really pleased to be here today with all of my esteemed colleagues. As Karen mentioned, I am the Director of Pro Bono Activities for the law firm of Mayer Brown. We are a global law firm of about 1,600 lawyers across 22 offices. I started in the litigation practice of Mayer Brown as an associate, but always with the goal of practicing public interest law. And I went into the pro bono department more than 15 years ago. And I now have the pleasure of overseeing the firm's pro bono practice on a global basis. And in terms of the work that Mayer Brown does in its pro bono practice, so we have a vast array of areas in which we practice, and I'm not really going to talk about each of them because we would be here all day with a long list. But, we strive to practice in the areas where we can serve the needs of the communities in which we live and work, as well as the interests of our lawyers. And a very large focus of our pro bono practice is in the area of immigration. That's primarily because there's such a significant need in this area, but it's also because it's an area where many of our transactional lawyers feel comfortable getting involved, because a lot of the immigration work that we do doesn't require courtroom or litigation experience. As a regular part of our immigration pro bono practice, we also have a business immigration practice. So I want to distinguish between those two, is that, we do work in the areas of asylum, refugee rights, special immigrant juvenile status, DACA applications, T visas, U visas, VAWA applications, citizenship and legal permanent residency applications, detained immigrant cases, which we do a lot with CARE Coalition. I've probably forgotten a few, but One thing that I want to point out, which is really critical to our ability to do the work that we do in the immigration area, and frankly, in all the other areas that we are involved with in our pro bono practice, is our partnership with organizations like the ones that my fellow panelists work at. We have a vast array of lawyers who are really interested in doing pro bono work, and we think it's really important that we be part of the access to justice, filling the access to justice gap. But at the same time, we don't normally have the expertise that is necessary in order to handle some of these cases. And so we partner with organizations like the ones that are represented here today that provide our lawyers with training and mentoring and support, and frankly are the critical aspect of the success of our pro bono program and our ability to do the work that we do. And so with that, I will stop and I will turn it back to Karen to introduce the rest of the panelists.
Okay, thank you, Marcia. And don't worry, we'll come back and follow up on some of those areas that you mentioned. You gave a reference to Care Coalition, so I think I'll take that as the opportunity to segue to Austin. Since it is the Washington Council of Lawyers, Care Coalition is the locally based, DC-based legal service provider in this area. So Austin, why don't we turn to you and have you tell the audience about your work at Care Coalition and a little bit of introduction to CareCo as a whole.
Absolutely, and thanks so much for having me. Thanks, folks, for joining this event. So I'll speak first to Care Coalition in general. So as Karen said, we are a locally based nonprofit organization that represents detained immigrants in the DMV region. So there are 2 detention centers in Maryland, which are now closing actually, and I'll talk about that later, and 2 detention centers in Virginia. So we represent folks in those detention centers and increasingly to other ones as folks get transferred to different areas. Again, I'll talk more about that. So we provide a wide array of immigration legal services to folks in the detention centers. Typically, it's defensive removal defense. So in immigration court, arguing for why someone should be able to stay in the country through various forms of relief like asylum or cancellation of removal or things like that. And so we've got 3 main divisions. We've got the detained adult program, where we represent adults detained in the region, the detained kids program, where we represent children in ORR shelters, so Office of Refugee Resettlement shelters in the area, and then once they are released as well. And then we've got the Immigration Impact Lab, where I work, and we do impact litigation in federal district court and circuit courts of appeals in the region. So which brings me to my work. I'm an Equal Justice Works Fellow. I'm a recent grad from Georgetown Law and started my project about 9 months ago. And I focus on federal habeas litigation in the district courts. So I basically am trying to argue for someone's release on constitutional or statutory grounds from detention through a habeas mechanism. And so that's part of the lab's impact work. So that's just a summary of what Care Coalition does, and I'm excited to talk more about our work and how you can get involved.
Very good. Thank you, Austin. And Marcia, I want to put a pin in the impact litigation piece and make sure when we come back to you later that we get a chance to hear a bit about that from the law firm side. But next, let's broaden out for the benefit of the larger national audience, or for those who may not end up later in DC. Can I turn to you, Shailene, to tell us a bit about Remain, what Remain's focus is in the Western region, and in particular, what you're working on out there?
Sure thing, thank you. So Remain, or the Rocky Mountain Immigrant Advocacy Network, is the only nonprofit legal service provider that works at the Aurora Detention Facility, which is what I do, and I'll talk about that in a second. We also provide legal representation and information to kids and families in front of the immigration court in Denver, Colorado, and also provide legal services to kids in ORR facilities in Colorado. I believe there's 2 of them. Remain also works on advocacy, and we assist in passing legislation that affects not only our clients, but the immigrant community as a whole here in Colorado. And also we have some fabulous social workers who provide more of a holistic approach, which assists our clients on, with medical information or housing assistance. So I work particularly, like I said, at the detention center in Aurora, Colorado. I do direct representation through the universal representation model, which is like the public defender system in the criminal legal context. Since, as you may know, there is no right to government-funded counsel for individuals in immigration proceedings. So I work with individuals who were Denver residents before their imprisonment by ICE. And I work primarily with people who are in front of the Aurora Immigration Court. I also do a lot of the universal representation advocacy and attempts to start legal defense funds, both on a state level and also the local level, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Thank you.
Okay, good. I want to make sure that you have a chance to talk about the universal rep model, what that is and how it's growing. So make sure when we come back to you that you do build on that a little bit more. And Adonia, now I'm going to turn to you to broaden it out even further and ask you to tell us about the ABA Commission on Immigration, what it does, the various projects it has, and what your role is in particular and how it relates to the delivery of pro bono services, both on individual level and the policy piece.
Absolutely, and so excited to be here with everybody, particularly my colleagues at Remain and CARE Coalition. Those organizations do incredible work. We interact with them often at the ABA Commission on Immigration, so happy to be there with everybody on today. So as Karen mentioned, my name is Adonia Simpson. I direct policy and pro bono at the ABA Commission on Immigration. And if you're not familiar with the commission, we're an entity within the ABA. We have appointed volunteer commissioners and advisory members, and we really work to ensure the fair treatment and full due process rights for all immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers in the United States. And the way that we do that is it's a little bit complex. Not only are we informed by our members who are in academia and other nonprofits, in private practice, but also a lot of the work that we do is informed by our offsite projects. So we have 3 offsite projects that are on the ground doing incredible work, engaging with individuals in proceedings at the border or other providers. So our first project is ProBar, located in Harlingen, Texas. And over particularly the last few months, they've been so incredibly busy dealing with the whiplash that is Title 42 and the Remain in Mexico policy. We also have the Immigration Justice Campaign located in San Diego, who likewise have been incredibly busy and growing. And similar to what Shailene mentioned at Remain is also standing up a universal representation project. So been doing a lot of phenomenal work there. And then our third offsite project is CILA, the Children's Immigration Law Academy, based in Houston, Texas. And they have actually just expanded to be a national technical assistance resource for providers serving unaccompanied children in removal proceedings, both detained and non-detained. So, the ABA Commission on Immigration, we have the entity itself, which is relatively small. Our office, I'm based in DC, but we have our offsite projects that are doing incredible work all over the country and really working to inform a lot of the policy work that we're doing at the commission. So we have tons to talk about there. I know Karen has a lot of questions, and I know I'm looking forward to hearing from my other panelists. So Karen, I'll pass it back to you.
Okay, thanks a lot, Adonia. I think On the next question, what we want to talk about a bit is the way volunteers can get involved, and that is volunteers in the broader legal community, but also for the purposes of the summer associates and summer interns today. How can they get involved in each organization's work, potentially in the course of this summer, but also in their next year in school, their work going forward, and then, you know, beyond after they're out of school and into practice. So I think I'll go first to Austin. Can you tell us how CARE Coalition is able to use volunteers, what some of the various areas are? Of course, in your own project, the work in the lab, but others as well, to the extent you can speak about the other projects.
Absolutely, yeah, thank you. So I think the primary way that summer associates and interns can get involved is by joining case teams that take pro bono cases. So we regularly refer pro bono cases to our partner firms with which we work closely. We post those, we post cases that we have on our website, and then also distribute them via listservs that I'm sure all firms are on, to notify them about cases that we have a pro bono need. And summer associates and interns, subject to, of course, to the approval of the various firms, can join those case teams and be a part of it. So just to give you an example, we just had a case with Perkins Coie, and I will put the link, the LinkedIn shout out, where a summer associate joined a case team, and it was a very successful case where we won a termination for a client who had a green card. They were seeking to terminate his green card based on a conviction. And we showed that that conviction was an in absentia conviction for someone who was unhoused at the time, convinced the judge to terminate the proceedings such that the person kept the green card. So this is an example of how associates and interns could get involved on case teams through our pro bono work. And we have all types of pro bono work, whether that is special immigrant juvenile status for kids, or full merits rep for adults, like asylum, cancellation, removal, lots of different opportunities that you can check out. And then in individual capacity, without necessarily needing to be part of a case team through the firm, you can also volunteer with us, and just go to our website and fill out a volunteer form. So there's two main forms of volunteering. You can do translations if you speak or write a foreign language, particularly Spanish, Portuguese, stuff like that. We regularly have translation needs, translating documents for court proceedings. In addition, there's the option of working on our CARE Coalition hotline, which is our crucial connector between our attorneys and folks detained in the region. And folks can volunteer to work that hotline regardless of whether they speak Spanish or not. So there's several opportunities as a volunteer, as an individual capacity, and as well to join case teams, pro bono case teams.
Great, thanks. And if I understand it correctly, Austin, CARE Coalition has a variety of models depending on the work. You may be co-counseling a matter, right? If it's a large scale litigation, some of your lab impact work, but in some of the other direct rep, it may be direct pro bono case placement with the firm with mentoring offered, but not with CARE Coalition participating as counsel in the ongoing rep. Is that right?
That's correct. So typically, if someone were to take one of our pro bono referrals, that would be their case, and we would provide rigorous mentorship, of course, but we wouldn't be co-counsel in some situations, including for the impact lab. When we do certain types of impact cases, we will co-counsel with firms. For example, co-counsel with Arnold and Porter on a case about accessing records. So there's lots of different ways we do that.
Perfect, thanks. And can I ask you, we're going to move on, but can you go ahead and put the the link to the website for Care Coalition in the chat so people who are interested can have a look at that later.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. And Shalene, can you tell us about Remain, please, and your volunteer model and how folks might be able to get involved now or in future?
Sure. So we accept legal interns all throughout the year. We, in particular, for the children's team, which works on the non-detained docket in Denver, and also for the detention team, which works in the facility. Our legal orientation program conducts intakes with everyone that's detained that obviously wants assistance. So I know that team would love more hands on deck there, since the landscape is ever changing and there's always people coming in and out of the facility. We are still currently remote, so if you're not in Colorado, no worries. Feel free to reach out. I am actually the intern coordinator, so and I think my information will be distributed after this, so feel free to reach out to me if you're interested in a legal internship. If you're not and need something with less hours, less work, we also have volunteers for interpretation and translation services. And in particular, we're really struggling with finding Pashto and Dari interpreters, but obviously other languages, of course, are necessary. Our clients are diverse and come from all over the world. And like I said, because I'm the intern coordinator, I'm always looking for creative volunteer opportunities. So if you think of something, a certain project that you're interested in, like habeas work, feel free to reach out and I'll see if we can connect you to the right attorney on the team. As far as pro bono opportunities, I think currently we're only looking for attorneys. So if you are interested after you graduate, or if you're already an attorney, we also have an amazing pro bono coordination team that is able to assist you in finding a case that we need help placing. So feel free to reach out to me.
Thank you. And I'll ask you the same thing to please put the website information in the chat. So Adonia, this is like your full-time job, recruiting and connecting pro bono volunteers all over with all kind of opportunities from small to big, on site to remote. So why don't you give us an overview of that, and then as well pointing people to how they can look at the Commission's pro bono opportunities.
Absolutely. And I think, over the last couple of years, we've all learned that through the pandemic, that there has been a lot of opportunity. I think it's forced a lot of providers to think outside the box on how to engage folks remotely. And in addition to that, we've also done a lot of thought into, we know there's been so much asks on pro bono's time, and there's been so many things happening. And we've definitely picked up on the appetite from pro bonos to have more lighter touch or limited scope opportunities. So that's something that we've been doing at the ABA Commission on Immigration, is trying to really create a menu and a kind of a wide variety of opportunities to plug in and engage. We realize that every opportunity is not going to be right for everyone, depending on circumstances. So we do want to kind of give multiple ways that people can kind of test the waters, get to know us, get to know the opportunities, and maybe take a deeper dive on a case. So what I mean by that is we do actually run a national detention hotline. We have opportunities for interns to come on board and provide legal orientation to individuals who are detained at facilities all over the US, which is a great way to learn a lot of skills. We tend to open that up to interns, but we may have opportunities down the road for attorneys to provide advice and counsel. Another thing that we've developed in the last year or so, is we've partnered with some organizations in South Florida to provide virtual temporary protected status clinics. So it started off with individuals from Venezuela that were seeking this temporary protection. We then added Haitians. We've now added Ukrainians, and we'll be adding Cameroonians in the near future. And this is a great way. It's a 2 to 3 hour commitment. If you're not an immigration practitioner, you can either be a form preparer. That means meeting with the applicant, helping them pro se complete the TPS application. Everything's reviewed by an expert immigration attorney. If you have language abilities, particularly Creole, Russian, or Ukrainian, we sure do need you. So you have an opportunity to work with an attorney and engage in that process and really help somebody out in getting some sort of protection in the interim while things are working out. So we have our virtual TPS clinic, so a light touch once a month, couple hour commitment. Something that we've partnered on with HIAS is what we're calling a Pro Se Plus clinic for Afghan asylum seekers. As you all know, the numbers, I think some of the numbers that there's 80,000 Afghan parolees. About 40% of them are going to be eligible for special immigrant visa status. The rest at this point are looking like they're going to have to apply for asylum. And we realize that there's not going to be enough pro bono attorneys to meet that need. So we're working with HIAS on a more creative way to meet the needs for legal representation. So we've developed a Pro Se Plus clinic model, which means that we're looking at firms and it's groups of people. We have associates and partners and just groups of folks at the firm coming together and taking a handful of cases for a limited scope project, which means 2 to 4 months, and really working with the applicant and their families to create a robust 589 asylum application with supporting documents and really putting these applicants in the best position possible to be able to proceed with their case. We also have something called Federal Free Legal Answers, which is if you are a practitioner in Veterans Affairs or immigration, we could really use you. Karen always says it's pro bono in your pajamas. It's a way to hop online, answer some questions anonymously, and provide really critical information to folks who may not be able to afford an attorney or can't just have that 1 or 2 questions that need answered that may not merit going and getting an attorney. So I can share information on that as well. And then finally, when we started off this conversation, I mentioned our pro bono projects at the border. We have tons of direct representation opportunities with them. Our project in San Diego is doing a lot of work around the expedited family group dockets, the dedicated dockets in 11 jurisdictions, San Diego being one of them. So we're really needing attorneys that are going to be willing to take these cases on, these expedited cases on for representation, amongst other cases, which we can talk about more later. I know I've probably gone on a little bit longer. So Karen, I'll pass it to you and I'll grab the link to put in the chat.
Thanks, Adonia. The only other comment I was going to make about the Federal Free Legal Answers on that is only attorneys can do it. Law students cannot participate on their own. You have to be an attorney admitted to practice somewhere in the United States. But for people in law firms who are working with attorneys who are admitted, and especially, Marcia mentioned that Mayor Brown has a billable practice. There's nothing whatsoever wrong with you checking out who in your firm may participate already in Federal Free Legal Answers or may be interested in signing up for it. And then there's a function where if there's a question that needs research or some additional work done before the lawyer can answer a question, that's a place where you could get involved in support of an attorney and contribute to the formulation of an answer. So I want to encourage everybody to check out the Free Legal Answers when Adonia puts the information there. So thank you everyone for that one. The last person on this topic is Marcia, and I know, Marcia, obviously Mayor Brown is not running programs or projects to which you're trying to recruit people, but I want to invite you to chime in or add a comment to anything that anyone else has said, and then maybe from the law firm perspective, talk about, what you look for when looking for partners or projects. What's going to work for you? What are some of the factors that you think about so that the attendees have the benefit of some of the thought processes about what's good pro bono in a law firm setting?
Sure, absolutely. So Just in terms of, how summer associates or interns can get involved, I would just really strongly encourage those folks who are on the phone, if you're at a firm and you haven't yet had the opportunity to get involved in pro bono, please reach out to your firm's pro bono counsel or whomever is in charge of pro bono at your firm. We strongly encourage all of our summer associates to get involved in pro bono, and we actively, work to do that because we think it's a really important piece of the work that we do. So, there are lots of opportunities, for you to get involved at your firm. I also want to pivot a little bit, not quite answer Karen's question, but I wanted to, something that often gets raised to me by law students when they reach out, law students who are particularly interested in public interest law, have very specific passions that are related to social causes. And, they want to know, well, if I go to a law firm, am I giving up my opportunity to do that? And, obviously the work that legal services organizations do is critical. Not everyone is in a position to maybe become a legal services lawyer. And so, the one thing I just wanted to say is that, so there's really more than one path that you can take to staying involved and active in the areas that you feel passionate about. And so, you can go to a law firm and have a committed pro bono practice, as many of our lawyers do, in the field that you feel passionate about. And certainly one of the things to look at when you're looking at firms is that something that I can do? So, I just wanted to raise that because I know it can sometimes, be something that people think it's really an either or, that if they don't go to legal services, they're giving up their ability to work on things that they really care about. And you're not, if you're committed. And you're willing to put the time in while you're at the law firm. So I wanted to just, a little bit of an aside, but, in terms of, the kinds of projects and organizations that we look for, we're really looking for things that are, where we can partner with organizations, as I said previously, that, are really good partners with us and can provide us, with the support and the training that our lawyers need in order to really be effective advocates for our clients. And then, we really look for a wide variety of different projects, as I think a lot of the folks who have talked already have mentioned. We have lawyers who they really want to do pro bono work, but they really only have 20 hours. And so we look for projects that can help them get involved without, having to have an extensive commitment because they just don't have that, and then, we have lots of lawyers who, and we'll get to this topic, want to be involved in impact and, want to roll up their sleeves and put in that time. And so and then there are folks that are in between. So we really look for a wide variety of pro bono projects and partnerships that, can meet sort of the criteria that our lawyers have for, how much they think they can get involved.
Perfect. Thanks, Marcia. And that gives me a chance to say, in my role in the law firm, there are a variety of ways that I try to match people with projects. And one is an interest area. Let's say it's, children or LGBTQ rights or whatever. Some is they want to learn a skill, which is they want litigation, or maybe some others, they want to avoid litigation. Some it's the time commitment, some it's the issue area. But even in immigration pro bono, the same thing is true. If someone wants to avoid court, there's a way to do that. There's a paper application or an interview, some of the things that Adonia talked about. If they want litigation skills, get them into immigration court. If they want to help children, there's plenty of children's immigration pro bono. If they want to exercise a language skill, there are almost unlimited ways to find a way to do that. So there are many, many ways of making the match. So I want to encourage people to think creatively at the time about what you're looking to do, what you're looking to learn, what you're looking to give, and if you look in the the range of immigration legal service providers, there's no question that you'll find a way to do that. So the next question for me, this is kind of the, well, it's wrong to say fun, but really the most emergent, the most timely or time sensitive question. I'm going to start here with Marcia is, how is the work that you're doing changing? You know, you've talked about the bread and butter, the staples, what your program does all the time, but what about now? What's going on now? How do you adapt to the things going on in the environment? How has your program changed, either in light of COVID, in light of current events, whatever it may be? Tell us how you've had to pivot and how your work has shifted, and then I'll pose the same questions to other people.
Sure. That's a terrific question. I think, I talked a little bit about sort of the regular part of our pro bono immigration practice and the general asylum and immigration work that we do. But, in addition to that, we often respond to emerging issues of the day. That's across our pro bono practice, but I will say that in the past 5 years, it's been largely focused in the immigration space because of immigration policies that have been passed. So, just as an example, recently, we were involved in the evacuation of almost 150 young women from Afghanistan following the Taliban takeover in August of last year. These were all women who were students at an organization called the Asian University for Women, which is a long-standing pro bono client of the firm. And AUW reached out to us for help with the evacuation in the chaotic last days of the U.S. military's withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I will say that it was a harrowing 48 hours where we had to marshal the resources of many, many different people at the firm in order to find ways up the chain of command in order to get these students into the Kabul airport. We were finally successful, and the students were flown to Fort McCoy in Wisconsin, where they remained for 5 months or so while they were waiting for their security clearance. And I will say that these young women, mostly between the ages of 18 and 22, they had been studying remotely in Afghanistan with AUW because of the pandemic. They really made the best of this situation, being far away from their families. They set up classes for the children and even some of the adults to teach them English and some other skills, because most of them were fluent English speakers. And they're really just amazing, amazing women. And they're all now studying at 8 different universities across the United States, which is something that we help to coordinate. And we are now coordinating a coalition of 20 law firms and legal departments that are assisting each of them with filing for asylum in the United States. So that's just one example of sort of how, we, marshal our resources to really, address issues of the day. Another one is the impact litigation that we do. And again, we've done a lot of significant impact litigation over the past 5 years, challenging Trump administration immigration policies. And so, to just name a few, we obtained an injunction against the Muslim travel ban. It's odd that was so long ago. It feels like forever ago. But we successfully challenged the termination of temporary protected status for Haitians. We had a decisive victory in our challenge to the Trump administration's law that stripped asylum seekers at the border of their right to access the U.S. asylum process. The Trump administration's COVID-19 immigration bans. We secured a nationwide preliminary injunction against a proposed rule that made it harder for immigrants to apply for fee waivers when they were doing their naturalization applications. And so, that is just, that type of impact litigation where we're really challenging policies that are being implemented or assisting with major issues of the day is a really important part of our immigration practice. And, and again, I kind of want to reiterate that, we do all of these in partnership with public interest organizations. All of these were done with organizations like the Southern Poverty Law Center, Center for Constitutional Rights, American Immigration Council, and, they provide, their expertise, and we provide a lot of the resources that a large law firm has that a public interest organization might not. But, it's a great way for our lawyers to, really feel like they're making a difference, and for us to be able to do what we as law firms do really well, which is engage in, incredibly sophisticated and time-consuming litigation in order to make a real difference.
Thanks, Marcia. You've done a wonderful job of making your own point, which is going to a law firm doesn't mean you're not contributing to public interest work, right? That's an amazing array of the type of things that you've been able to do over the years. I think when you and I first came in close contact, it was around Iraq, right? And we've come a long way forward from then until now. So
yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, thank you for that. So Shalene, can I ask you from your own and the Remain perspective, what's changed in your work? What's different? What's timely for you these days?
That's a great question. I think we try to do a lot. It's a dumpster fire every single day. There's new rules that come down. What seems like weekly, one day you can advise your client to do one thing, and then the next day you have to say, just kidding, the rule has changed, the law has changed, we shouldn't do that anymore. I want to talk about in particular how COVID changed the landscape in detention, because there are continuous issues there since the first COVID case in 2020 in the detention center in Aurora. Clients and people who are detained continue to face dangers from COVID that impact their immigration proceedings. ICE continues to detain people and transfer them between facilities and across state lines, which obviously increases the COVID numbers. ICE refuses to take people to court. They miss their hearings, which prolongs their detention. ICE isolates them from their loved ones and places the community, both the detained population and also the community who are not detained in danger of COVID-19. And it also exacerbates the challenges that we as attorneys face, who are entering the facility, exposing ourselves to COVID, and also people who are detained to COVID as well. The in-person and remote work comes with a variety of challenges like access to counsel, access to our clients, concerns with due process when representing clients virtually at trial. At one point, we were only using telephonic. We were only calling into our trials and our hearings. Now, thankfully, we at least have ability to look inside of the courtroom or be there in person. And then, we also have to, we had to figure out how to invent new methods of advocacy to protect our clients' health and their rights during the pandemic. Immigration court did not stop for people who were detained. I know it did for non-detained folks, but a lot of our clients have waited in detention for months on months, which right, the court thought it was a form of protection, yes, but also didn't allow for the due process of our clients. Thankfully, we have partners all around the country who are able to litigate some of the COVID challenges, like the Fryhot versus ICE litigation, which we assisted in on a minor scale. But using that Fryhot litigation, we were able to get people out of detention quicker than pre-COVID. Also, on the non-detained docket side, which I know Adonia, you'll talk about the dedicated docket a little bit, but the dedicated docket really hampered our ability to assist the people already in front of the court, right? Because we had to shift to individuals who recently entered, whose cases, 300, they had the IJ had to adjudicate their case within 300 days if they were represented. So this dumpster fire is ever changing. Also, the fact that things are happening all around the world, like Afghanistan. Denver is one of those locations where refugees are able to come and live and remain, knowing that there are lots of people who need assistance. We're now also assisting that population, which I believe is around the thousands.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's happening in other communities all around the country too. So it's a wonderful illustration. Thank you. I'm gonna turn to Adonia, since I think dumpster fire is a very good introduction to what she's been doing with as well. I just realized there's one thing I wanted to say with a shout out to a lot of the firms who have people participating on the call. Since Marcia mentioned the amazing work that Mayor Brown has done on Afghanistan, I want to mention that my firm, Fried Frank, has been representing the International Association of Women Judges on trying to get the women judges of Afghanistan evacuated to countries of safety and then resettled in various countries around the world. We're giving legal guidance to the association, but a lot of firms on the call are representing people directly. That includes DLA, Debevoise, Aiken Gump, and some others, and I don't mean to leave anyone out. But those of you who know there's work like that going on in your firms, I want to encourage you to find a way to connect with that. So Adonia, what's the dumpster fire at the commission? What's been, your pivot of late that you didn't already have a chance to talk about?
How much more time do we have? No, I think something that was really important that Marcia and Shailene both brought up was just kind of this ever-changing, we have new policies or new regulations, and then we have litigation. And under the previous administration, we were oftentimes seeking pro bono counsel to assist in fighting some of these things. Now, we're in that position where we're kind of getting adjusted to a new rule or maybe a new status quo. And then there's litigation in Texas that now turns it all on its ear. And we have to, exactly like Shailene said, go back and say, well, surprise, we thought we were doing this and now we're not. So as I mentioned earlier, we have offsite projects at the border, and I just can't talk how impressed I am with our staff that is doing that work day in and day out. It is incredibly draining. It's incredibly difficult. They've been on the front lines of dealing with things like the Remain in Mexico policy. So particularly our team in Harlingen at ProBar, they're working with firms like Aiken Gump and other firms to do this non-refoulement interviews. So individuals that are kind of being put in this process of potentially being returned to Mexico to go through their immigration proceedings, have this opportunity to express a fear of return to Mexico or maybe meet an exemption based on their personal circumstances. And there's been a cadre of really phenomenal volunteers and staff that have been engaging with these individuals to try to get them out of the process. And even once individuals are in this process, in this Remain in Mexico process, and have to try to meet with pro bono counsel from a shelter in Mexico that has spotty Wi-Fi, if any Wi-Fi at all, to be able to connect and fill out an application. but our team at ProBar has actually been working to represent and provide pro se assistance to these individuals in the MPP program. And I'm really proud to say that I think there was 27 of the 5,000 people that have been put in the MPP program, there's been 27 asylum victories, and 11 of them come out of ProBar and what our staff did in ProBar. So that's just kind of a small illustration about how intense the work can be. The stories that they internalize and hear can be really traumatizing. And we see a lot of, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, about secondary trauma
Right.
and just some kind of the difficulties of the work. But anyways, I went on a little bit of a tangent, but we're seeing these things happen every day. We thought Remain in Mexico was going to be going away, and then because of litigation, it's back. And we're still hopefully, has anyone heard? Was there a decision today? No decision today on Remain in Mexico? Okay.
I haven't heard yet.
We're eagerly awaiting a decision from SCOTUS about what may happen next. But we are, it's been many, many years of policies changing rapidly, and Remain in Mexico is just one of those things. Also, we have Title 42, where there's just thousands and thousands of individuals who aren't even able to access our asylum system or access assistance. So point of this all being, things are changing extremely rapidly and, incredibly difficult to keep up on. It's a matter of really understanding what the litigation means. For example, the latest round that I think we're grappling with is we saw a resurgence of something called prosecutorial discretion, where, ICE and the Office of Chief Counsel has some leeway to dismiss cases and dispose of cases that are not priority cases, to do a lot of things, decrease the backlog, just kind of really use their powers to determine, what cases merit resources being expended on. And now we have litigation around that. And I think tomorrow is the day that, there may be an injunction that will kind of determine, we're not even sure what that means as far as how we'll be able to proceed in these cases and what it'll mean. So even when we do have these changes, oftentimes we don't necessarily have the answers, and we're not sure what we're going to be able to tell our clients or our staff members on the ground, and that's a big part of what we do at the commission, is try to gather information to be supportive of our team members that are on the ground in Harlingen, in San Diego, on the front lines doing this work. So it's been busy.
Thanks, Adonia. I think the moral of that story is that even the experts have to learn and change and pivot every day, right? It's not like the law and you're done, because
absolutely,
absolutely.
Every day is an exercise. Every day is an exercise, and going back to basics and reading it and going back to statutes and regulations, but then also reading the case law and trying to figure it out.
Well, we have two more substantive questions, which I'm going to try to take in a more popcorn type format than one by one to get us through on time. But before I do, Austin, you're the most junior person on this panel, but I wanted to give you a chance to say a word about the how things have changed, how you've had to pivot, if you have a perspective on that in your role.
Sure. Just for the sake of time, I'll just give one example of how CARE Coalition and my own work is changing. So as I mentioned, we represent folks in the DMV region. However, we had a good development that has produced some interesting consequences. So Maryland, the state of Maryland, by legislation, banned immigration detention in Maryland, or effectively banned it by prohibiting county governments from contracting with ICE to detain immigrants, and from private facilities, which is the vast majority of ICE detention. And so we're seeing the ICE detention centers in Maryland close, and folks get sent elsewhere, largely to Pennsylvania. And so what CARE Coalition has been doing, a big change in our work, is we are now expanding into Pennsylvania, which is a new circuit, right? Third Circuit versus Fourth Circuit. It's different federal district courts in order to bring habeas. So I am currently in the process of getting admitted to the Western District of Pennsylvania in order to bring habeas cases up there. So it's a big challenge that we're facing. As Karen was talking about, we are experts in Fourth Circuit law, and we know this area, but now we have to go and pivot to a new area and learn that law, adapt to different immigration courts, different systems in order to effectively represent our clients, Maryland residents who are sent there. So it's just one example of how our work is
Perfect.
changing and how that affects mine. Yeah.
Very good illustration, and thank you for that. So I want to tell everybody what the plan is. We have 5 minutes left for the substantive part, so I'm going to ask one question and just invite everyone to, pop up, chime in, say whatever you have to say on this topic. Then we have the last 15 minutes from 2:15 to 2:30 for Q&A and conversation. So I'll pose one question to move us into that, and anyone that's interested can stay on for it, and then you'll have a chance to pose any other questions that you have to this panel as well. So my question here for our last formal 5 minutes is the self-care question that Adonia alluded to. How do you avoid burnout? What sustains you in this work? What are your self-protection, self-care mechanisms, to the extent that you have time for those? So mic's off, everybody, chime in as you are led. Oh my gosh, that sounds like a daunting question. Let's hear something from you guys.
Well, I'll go ahead and start, although,
Okay.
I think to a certain degree, this might be a question that the other panelists probably, may need to address more. I would say that, it is really difficult, especially if you've been doing something for a long time, to avoid burnout. And, burnout does happen. I try to do things outside of my work that bring me joy, whatever that is for you, and that get me out of my head a little bit, and allow me to relax. And I've, made a point of doing that, because if not, you could be all consumed. And the other thing I've really, consciously try to do now, to the extent possible, is to disconnect from my phone, from my email. I really try hard after I'm done for the day, no matter what time that is, or on the weekend. I don't respond to emails anymore that aren't urgent. Because what I learned was, you think you're getting something off your plate, but all you're doing is starting a whole conversation. It's never going to end. Then all of a sudden, an hour later, you're still on that email. So, it can be hard to do, but I think it's actually very helpful. If things aren't urgent, to just let them go until the next business day. So that's my little 2 cents.
Perfect. Thank you. Who else?
I think those are really good tips. I think also we've seen a huge shift in recent years. When I first started practicing, burnout, secondary trauma, all those sort of topics were not really discussed. It was kind of, everyone wore their, wore it as a badge of honor, and I think now there's a lot more open conversations, and I do encourage people to have those conversations with your supervisor, with your colleagues, with your friends, talk about, how the work may be impacting you, because I think recognizing that impact is kind of the first step to realize. I remember when I was first practicing, I was having a lot of depression and a lot of issues, and it took me a while to realize it was because I'd been working with unaccompanied kids in and out every day and hearing really traumatic stories. And it didn't click for me initially that that's maybe why. So I think number one is like talking about it and not being ashamed to raise awareness about that it is a real issue that impacts a lot of attorneys and staff generally that work in this field, not just attorneys, anybody doing immigration work. It can be really heavy, and you see families separated daily, and you see folks detained indefinitely, and that's things that are really difficult to process sometimes. Something that really keeps me energized is actually new staff and new volunteers. Like, having the opportunity to talk about the issues with people that maybe aren't as aware, and bring some awareness to it. So if any of you all are looking to volunteer, you'll keep me centered and grounded, and I'll be a much happier person if you volunteer with us. But the thing Marcia said that I think is the most important is learning when to draw those lines and disconnect. And it's okay. Like there's messages that can wait till Monday, that you don't need to respond to on a Friday night, and finding those things that bring you joy, in your personal life. I like gardening. Never thought I'd be a gardener, but sure enough, it's my happy place. So finding those things in your life, and it just makes the work that you do so much more fulfilling.
Okay, thank you, Adonia. Anybody else? Shalene or Austin, anything you'd add?
Yeah, I'll agree with all those things. And also for me personally, my clients are what keeps me going,
That's
right? People should know why and what is happening to them in this ever-changing and racist system that wasn't made for Black and brown people to thrive. And I personally try to give them all the information that they need so that they can make an educated choice that will ultimately affect them, their families, and their futures. They're some of my clients are some of the most resilient and strongest people that I've ever met in my life. And yeah, they keep me going, and that their power is what really keeps me going, even if they don't win their case.
Right. Thanks for that. That's one thing I say, reveling in the wins when you get them is one thing that sustains us. But the other thing is, even when you can't deliver that kind of a win, you can always make your clients feel that they've been heard and that they've been respected. And in a system like this, that's a huge win. And that's something we can always deliver. Austin, anything else?
That's just exactly what I was going to say. I think I'll be honest with you that I think when you serve as an intern and a volunteer, even in clinics and law school, I think you're exposed to more wins than otherwise, because you might get cases that are more queued up to be successful and you have all the support. And so I think I got spoiled doing this work for years as an intern or a volunteer, thinking that, oh, we can always win, right? And now as I start my career, I'm realizing that's just not the case, right? And what's inherently worth it is the fight, being in someone's corner when no one else is,
right?
And just being willing to celebrate that. So yeah.
Thank you very much. That's a great place to wrap up. I'm going to tell people the question I want us to start off with in the Q&A time is one that over the years students have asked, and that is, how do you prepare yourself for this kind of work? What should I study? Where should I work? What should I volunteer? Do you need a language? What, should I work with any certain professor? What about clinics? All of those kind of questions. So if people are really interested in moving this way going forward, I'll invite you to stay on with us for the Q&A part. And we also welcome any other ones that you have. Christina, can we go right into that, or do you need to say anything to close us out here with the formal part?
No, absolutely. Yep. Just a reminder that if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. If you want to speak to the panel, raise your hand and we will allow you to speak.
Perfect. Okay, so we're here for you now. We're quiet, we're listening, and we'll respond to your questions or to the last one that I just offered. If we don't have questions in the chat right away, why don't we just go ahead and let somebody start off on the prep? Who'd like to go on how you equip yourself? Austin, maybe you, since you're the most junior and have done it most recently.
Sure, yeah. So I would say one of the things I found in terms of getting involved in this work at the ground level, and it could take a lot of different forms because you can get involved in this work, as we've learned, through firms, right? But in terms of getting involved with this work from the perspective of a nonprofit provider in the public interest sector, I think it's all about just demonstrated commitment, right? So getting involved with as many opportunities as you can and finding things to specialize in, finding kind of niches in the work that need filling, in order to become indispensable in that way, right? So I found kind of my niche in detention work in habeas to bring something kind of new and creative to the work that's kind of novel. So I'd say that, and I personally did a fellowship, which is a common way to enter the work as an entry-level attorney. So getting funding from an outside source in order to fund a specific project at an organization. That's a common way. And I'm happy to talk to folks about who might be interested in fellowships about that process.
Great. Okay, thank you. Who else? Shalene, you look like you might be getting ready to say something.
Sure, I can go. Yes, commitment for sure. In my view, commitment doesn't necessarily mean like, right, interning or doing any of that, because I know law school is expensive and some of us do have to work throughout law school to be able to provide for ourselves and our families. If you're not able to, right, intern or do anything in the immigration field, what I look at is really like cultural awareness, a why do you want to do this work, is really impactful to me. And then, you know, any of the immigration courses that are offered in law school. Also, I do a lot of crim-im, so criminal law classes aside from the 1L classes. For me, it's really important to be able to understand the system that my clients, right, pass through before going through immigration proceedings. And sometimes it's very difficult to figure it out if you didn't have that or don't have those resources. And then I think in nonprofits, primarily language skills, from what I've experienced, you are required to have language skills. I guess depending on what populations the nonprofit serves. I know a lot of nonprofits serve a lot of Spanish-speaking communities, so it's costly to pay for interpreters and interpretation there. But I assume that that's not always the case. And empathy.
Very good. Thank you. Who else? Adonia.
I think some of your like kind of non-traditional immigration, like, your litigation, any sort of courses that really get you up on litigation skills or client counseling skills or something, because that's what so much of your time is. It's interacting with people, or potentially, even though immigration court, the federal rules of evidence kind of really don't apply in so many ways. I do think a lot of the adjudicators and judges do respect when somebody comes in with a knowledge of, court practice and court demeanor and how to put together and argue a case. So I do think it's worth investing in those sort of litigation trainings. Something else for folks that are looking to maybe not just work at a nonprofit, but potentially be a supervisor or a manager. There's going to come times where you're looking at like grants and deliverables. So really, some of the skills that I never learned in law school that I had to learn later was, really dealing with like Excel sheets and, and data and, reporting and how to write grant applications or how to, report out on deliverables. A lot of these things that you're not going to learn in law school, that you might learn through other courses and, management courses and supervision courses for nonprofits.
Very good. That's one you don't hear every day. Thank you for that. And Marcia.
I'm not sure that I have much to add here, just because the law firm environment is very different from going to a legal services organization. I think as I've already said, we, a lot of our lawyers don't necessarily have experience in these areas. And we partner with organizations so that we can successfully do this work. And, especially in the immigration area, where, we do a large percentage of our pro bono work, a lot of our lawyers, they learn at the firm and they actually become experts through the pro bono work that they do because they do it over and over again. So probably, one of the things that I would say, if you're interested in doing, immigration work, in a law firm setting is, concentrating in a particular area in your pro bono practice and really becoming that expert, because you will be really valuable to the firm. I really value our lawyers, associates, counsel, partners who have developed that expertise and that can mentor and truly supervise other cases, in partnership with the organizations we work with. So developing that expertise, when you go into a firm, I think is a really valuable skill, and actually allows you to stand out, amongst the other lawyers. Like they become leaders, in our pro bono practice because they've developed those skills, and it's, really, really invaluable, in particular in the immigration space where we do so much work.
Right. Thank you. That's exactly right, I think. And I'll say to anyone that's scared away by the immigration law courses or the clinic or whatever, I never studied immigration law in school, didn't do a clinic. I was worried about, learning what I needed to learn to be a good lawyer, focus on litigation, get out and be able to pass the bar. I learned everything I learned starting with one asylum case. I had to get a summer associate to write a part of an amicus brief in one case for the Washington Lawyers Committee Immigration Project, Jonathan Smith's organization, from whom you heard on the last panel. And I had to learn enough asylum law to supervise that. That fall, the Fourth Circuit granted oral argument in that case, and I was turned to do the Fourth Circuit argument. I had to learn more for that, and I was shocked by the lack of knowledge and awareness that the panel had in the immigration area. And I went from that to another case, to beyond asylum, to removal, to family-based, and on from there. So although there's a lot of things that are great prep, there's no one necessary entry point. It all comes back to the commitment that you heard about. So I think, Christina, if I'm right, we can hang out for a minute or two, but that's our agenda.
That is exactly right. I want to thank you panelists for taking the time for a fantastic conversation. And thank you, Karen, for facilitating our conversation. I will remind everyone that I will be sending follow-ups with recordings, recaps, and contact information so that you can follow up. I am so grateful that you joined us for the summer forum. I think it's a very important opportunity for us to come together. If there is any follow-up that you need from me, please do not hesitate to reach out. We have law student memberships, but even if you're not a member, I am happy to help. And we are always here to support you in your work. And I thank you all very much. Have a fantastic day and a great weekend. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.